I imagine if we were to compare notes as adults around our various Christmas experiences, that there'd be quite a bit of variety in the room. But I would also imagine if we were comparing notes about our experiences as children, there would be some common themes. And one of those common themes would be around that agonizingly painful waiting. The countdown towards Christmas, down and down and down and down until the big day. And if you had like an advent calendar in your house, it was like this agonizing, tormenting thing, because you see like all these windows that still needed to be opened, and you're still just waiting for this day to come. And it's just like you wanted to kind of peel these windows open to try to like jumpstart to Christmas Day. But that wait was so painfully long. And then you become an adult, and somebody says to you, there's 9 days till Christmas, and you panic. At least I can go, oh no, and my tribe of 4 kids are going, oh yeah. I'm going, oh no, it's going too fast. And they're going, oh no, it's going too slow. But when we were all kids, we thought it was all just painfully slow. Though some of you might be more like my retired parents. As they get older, it seems like they're becoming more and more like kids again. I get these daily texts, and they, kind of a countdown to Christmas each day, because they're like super excited. Christmas is coming, and they're flying up to Auckland to gather with the wider family. So they're going, this is so slow. And of course, Robin and I, thinking about our parents and in-laws coming to be with us, are kind of going, oh no, it's going too fast. But the great thing as a kid is no matter how slow it went, no matter how long it seemed to take to get to Christmas morning, we always got there, right? We always woke up on Christmas morning and were able to gather around the tree, the certainty of Christmas morning. This is the thrill of hope. This anticipation is captured in this favorite carol of mine, O Holy Night. Love it. And these, 3 Sundays before Christmas, we've been reflecting on a particular phrase each week from this carol. Last week, if you were around, we spoke about the weary world rejoices. And we saw about how a weary world can rejoice because of another set of 3 words, God with us. Today, I want us to explore what I think is just a wonderful phrase in this carol, a thrill of hope. A thrill of hope. The Hebrew word for hope has that sense of waiting with expectancy. Can we say that out loud together? Waiting with expectancy. Because this waiting with expectancy is what happens at Christmas year after year after year. Now, you may know this, so this won't be new information to many of you, but for generation upon many generations, there was always a handful, a remnant of Jewish people who waited every single day, not for Santa Claus, but for the Messiah. And every single generation, there was this group of people who lived their lives in this single focused obedience to this one that was to come. And yet here's the thing, 99.9% of those people who waited died without any fulfillment of that promise in their lifetime. They waited some more, and then they died without seeing all that they had been waiting for during their lifetime. Some abandoned hope because the waiting was so hard. Who in the world would devote themselves to a story that's hundreds, even thousands of years old and would still be waiting? But there was a remnant who waited with expectancy. Their waiting finally led to the thrill of hope, the fulfillment of hope. Finally, on Christmas Eve, God fulfilled his promise in a way that went beyond what anybody could ever imagine. The Son of God born as one of us, a baby born in a stable. But remember, before he came, people were waiting. And in fact, there were 400 years between the last prophet who spoke in the Old Testament until we get to the coming of Jesus. So just kind of get your head around that number for a moment. 400 years. So year after decade, after century and more, 400 years of silence, of waiting. Some gave up, but the remnant waited. Even though the remnant couldn't see what they were waiting for during their lifetime, they still waited. And all this should remind us of something the Apostle Paul wrote in the New Testament. He said about God's timetable is different to ours. He said, when the set time had fully come, God sent his son. So that meant generations, though. After generation of people waited and they waited and they waited, and waiting is hard. It's hard, isn't it? And that's why this is so relevant for us. You see, at times, God is seemingly silent. At times in your life, you'll step into these seasons where it feels like 400 years of silence. Things aren't coming together as you would expect them to come together. Some of you have been in a place like this before. For some of you, this is right where you are at this very moment. And it's at those times you will question whether this whole Christian narrative is true and whether it's kind of worth the sacrifices you make. And so you ask questions like, why am I serving? Why am I giving? Why am I missing out? Why aren't I moving in? Why aren't I just taking the money? Why aren't I running off? Why in the world am I continuing day after day believing in something that I can't even see around me? Why am I seeking to live in obedience and have my life shaped by these promises that go back hundreds and hundreds of years? Am I just kind of following all this because of what my parents once believed, or am I believing, just kind of doing this because I think life isn't going to go well for me otherwise? It's this weary world that I spoke about last week. What gets people through these tough seasons and these myriad of questions that come from seasons such as this is this thrill of hope. It's the realization that in the chaos of the dark night of the soul, there is what the carol refers to as this new and glorious morn that is to come. So I want to focus in on today what it looks like to wait with expectancy for that new and glorious morning still to come when Jesus will return for a second time. And what I want to do today is take you back to a book in the Bible that's often ignored. It's the book of Lamentations. Now, a book by the name of Lamentations should already alert you to the fact that this is a book about pain and misery and confusion. It goes back to 586 BC when Jerusalem fell, and the people were as distraught as they could possibly be and as you could possibly imagine. And the poet that put this book together himself was hurting along with all of the people around him. So I sat with this book this week. I discovered this beautiful structure to it. Chapters 1 and 2 are done as an acrostic, with the beginning of each verse beginning with one of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet in order. And there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, so no surprise to you that chapter 1 has 22 verses, chapter 2 has 22 verses as well, each describing, different letter describing the pain that the poet is feeling as he looks around him. As a great poet, he likes to put things, lay it out there, so he writes things like this. The thought of my suffering and homelessness is bitter beyond words. I will never forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. In that year of the siege and the day after it and the week after it, Jerusalem was full of pain. It was just agonizing. And this poet doesn't hold back in what he's feeling. In fact, he presents some pretty graphic ways to describe, using all these different letters and the way he feels. So one of the phrases I sat with this week, he says, you have covered yourself, O God, with a cloud so that no prayer can get through. Now, when you think of the cloud and God and God's presence, what tends to come to your mind? It's really, isn't it, the cloud of God's presence. I spoke about this last week. How God physically showed that he was with his people as they left Egypt and went right into the promised land, and this cloud of God's presence went over the tabernacle. This was meant to be a symbol, a sign showing God's people he was there. It's meant to be a symbol of encouragement. And yet the poet, because of the lens he now has in the midst of his pain, looks at that same symbol that was meant to be an encouraging aspect for the people, and he looks at it and says, no, God, you're hidden from us, and I don't like it, and nothing seems to be able to get through to you. You see, when we're in pain, our whole lens gets corrupted and distorted. You have to understand this guy is facing the worst possible thing he could face in his life. The city where he lived, where all of his family lives, where his hopes and dreams resided, has just been destroyed by an enemy nation. No doubt he's watched as family members have been hauled away into captivity, into Babylon, which is now modern-day Iraq. And he's absolutely devastated. If we were to rank this on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 just being a little bit disturbed and 10 being like deeply off the charts, he's way over here in the 10. Now, I doubt whether many of us in this room kind of see ourselves in that 9 or 10. But perhaps, though, as you read through some of this, I don't know, maybe you're thinking, no, this actually nails exactly what's going on in my life right now. So maybe you've come today assuming you're the only one who's felt as you do. You describe your experiences as going into darkness without any light. You feel like you're drowning. The poet here has those same experiences. He's known sickness, hunger, abuse, imprisonment. But I want you to see right now is that at this point that the poet isn't, putting his hands over his eyes and his ears, just going, no, I'm going to just ignore everything in my world. No, he's grieving. He's verbalizing his pain because things aren't right. But then you come to the middle of chapter 3. And what's interesting, after the first couple of chapters, uses this acrostic and kind of going through things, he does the same thing as you step into chapter 3, but in verse 21, the poet says this, "Yet, this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope." I love this. I'm going to call this to mind. I know it's back in the recesses of my mind somewhere, but it's not front and center where I need it to be. And so I'm going to do the hard thing. I'm going to pull it back from here, and I'm going to put it front and center in my mind. It's going to be this teeth-gritting decision, determination, this deliberate, something that you don't do from the emotions, but you do from the will. It's a hard choice he makes. I will do this. I will bring these things to mind in the midst of my pain and the chaos around me. So what is it that this poet calls to mind? The first thing I want you to notice is the 3 things about God, the 3 aspects, attributes of God that this poet brings front and center to his mind. He writes this: "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him." You might notice that this chapter, chapter 3, is a bit longer than the ones before it and after it. Remember, the Hebrew alphabet has, 22 letters. In the previous chapters, the poet, uses each of these letters to describe his pain. But here in chapter 3, there's 66 verses because he now kind of uses 3 letters of each of the alphabet in the Hebrew language and anchors in and now gives us 3 attributes, beginning all with the same letter, not to describe now his pain, but in the midst of his pain to describe who God is and what it is that gives him hope. The first 2 attributes are 2 words about God's love. The first one is translated a great love. It's the Hebrew word chesed. It's the term used to describe the loyal love of God. It's a God who makes promises. It's a God who enters into a commitment with people. It's a God that says, I'm going to keep my promise to you. It's loyal love. The second word is compassions. It's a word that expresses the emotional side of love. In fact, in the time of the Old Testament, the word first got used about, a mother, having this child develop inside of her womb. So you can kind of see how the word developed from this idea of compassion or love that a mother has for her unborn child. This is a word that speaks of God's emotion, his feelings, his affection for us. See, I love the way the poet uses both words for love. Got the loyalty part, God's commitment to us regardless of how he might feel. He's going to be true to us, committed to his word. And then the other word that says God is not only committed to us, but he has compassion. He feels something deeply for us, this all-encompassing love of God that leads this poet to talk about the thrill of hope anchored in his soul. Do you notice too the way the poet changes tense suddenly? Instead of just telling himself who this God is, he suddenly bursts into praise to this God. As he kind of brings these things front and center in his mind, he says, these things about God, his compassion, his loyalty, they're new every morning. Then he says, great is your faithfulness. He's just beginning to bring these things front and center, and he just kind of comes into worship. Remember, his circumstances at this point haven't changed at all. He's still crying out in the middle of his pain. But he says, every new day, God, your loyal love, your compassionate love, all of this is right there with me in the midst of my pain. Then he talks about another aspect of God. Not just his loyal love, not just his compassionate love, but he writes, I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. And I tend to use words like that to describe God today because things seem to work a bit differently for us now than when this poet was around. But 500 or 600 years before Jesus came on the scene, the people of Israel all had a plot of land, a portion of land. And this portion is what would keep them alive. So, you might lease out that piece of land for money and you'd use that to support you and your family, or you would farm out that land and from it you would feed your family. You see, this is the idea of a portion. So when the poet says, the Lord is my portion, he's using this word picture to describe, God is the one who keeps me alive. God is the one who keeps me going. Just like in the New Testament when Jesus taught us to pray, give us every day our, remember, daily bread. This is my portion because I need God every single day, every single moment. And so I will call to mind and I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, my daily bread. He is exactly what I need and everything I need. God is in today and God is in tomorrow. And he will provide everything you need for today and he will provide everything you need for tomorrow. So if your marriage is struggling, what I hope you'll understand is God is your portion. He will and is able to provide everything your marriage needs for both today and for tomorrow. If you're weak today, God is your portion. He is your strength made perfect in the midst of your weakness even today. If you're depressed right now, he is your joy. He is the lifter of your head. And again, remember, the poet's writing these wonderful things while he's surrounded by pain and misery. The circumstances around him haven't changed, but he's declaring right in the very middle of his weariness what he's experiencing, and right in the middle of this poem on lamentation, surrounded by all of this pain, he is anchoring himself, centering himself in the very character of God. And perhaps some of you need to do what the poet is doing right here, preaching to yourself. Where he says, I say to myself, he knew these things, but somehow they've gone to the cobwebs, the kind of the back part of our minds that we tend to ignore. And he makes that difficult, teeth-gritting decision to bring it front and center. How many of you, every now and again, you have to talk to yourself, you have to kind of preach to yourself some truth. You have to bring the very best message you've got, opening God's word, bringing these things to mind, preaching the best sermon you've got to yourself, to remember that God is front and center. He is present. So the poet says, I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, because he's my portion, because he loves me with this compassionate and loyal love, I will therefore wait for him. It's the word we hate, particularly as adults. Waiting is hard. Waiting, it's the same word connected to hope in the Hebrew language. He says, I see God in his loyal love. I see God in his compassionate love. I see God in the way he's providing for me and everything I need. Therefore, I will wait with expectancy. You see, friends, this is what we need to preach to ourselves every day about who God is, even amidst the difficult circumstances that crowd our lives. That's why into our summer series, straight after Christmas, we enter into a new preaching series that's just, in 2019, I need to know that my God is, it's just a blank. And every week we will bring a new attribute of God. If you're traveling, you can download it just so we can kind of anchor ourselves in the character of God, because this is what we need to have front and center of our minds. Then the poet comes to a new stanza. He reminds himself also of something he deems good. Remember, each of these stanzas has 3 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and he comes into a new one with, again, beginning with the same letter, but actually this time, it's not just the same letter, it's the same word, the Hebrew word good. In the middle of his pain that he's feeling deeply, he still looks at 3 things that are good. This is how it's translated into English. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man to bear the yoke while he is young. Those 3 verses, I think, reflect the same big idea that it's good to just wait quietly. It's good to have hope. It's good to even learn about suffering when you're young, because there's going to be times in life that get hard, and we need to learn what it is to wait and hope. Someone has said that, people can live 40 days or so without food, can live 8 days or so without water, live 4 minutes or so without oxygen, and they live a few seconds without hope. And I believe too many people are trying to live, trying to survive in a hope-deprived world. They're struggling to find anchors for their hope, and in fact, they've placed hope in the wrong places. That's the way some of you would describe your own situation right now. Some of you've anchored your hope in your company, and it may let you down. Or you placed your hope in another person, and they're not coming through for you. Or you put your hope in some outcome that you want to see in your life, and it's not turning out exactly the way you like it to do so. And the reason is, you're placing your hope in the wrong places. These things will let you down. We need to anchor our hope in the one who is able to be anchored into. I love what Hebrews 10 says. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. So I love the picture here. Let us hold on to it, he says. Grab hold of the hope that we profess and not let it go. See, the challenge today, I believe, for many of us, is we are grabbing hold of fear. We're grabbing hold of the darkness of the night, and we're letting go of the truth of God. Well, we need to do exactly the opposite. We need to let go of doubt, let go of panic, let go of anxiety, let go of stress, let go of all these other things that we try to cling to. Let go of these things and actually hold tight without letting go to the truth of who God is, to his attributes, to his promises. We don't let go of these things, and we cling to it, and we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and we wait expectantly. The poet sums it up this way. It's good to wait for the salvation of the Lord. Now, I wanted to give you a picture today of what waiting looks like that you will not forget, at least if this works out okay. And so I'd like to invite a little assistant to come up here with me. Her name is Onyx. And so Onyx, let's welcome Onyx up to the stage up here. Let's give her a big clap. Here she is. And so Onyx, come on, look. Come on. Hello. Onyx here, actually turned 7 yesterday. So it was her birthday yesterday. She is a beautiful Christian dog. And she wanted to help me out in the message today. So Onyx, Onyx? Yeah. Right on my hand here, I have something that you like. It's one of your treats. It has something with beef and chicken and pork and probably a bit of cat. And but here's the thing, Onyx. You're going to have to wait for it. You're going to have to wait. So come over here. Come over here. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Okay, over here. Over here. Onyx, over here. Okay, sit. 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 Okay, wait. Wait. It's very hard to wait, isn't it? Very hard to... Oh, Onyx, sit. Sit. Okay, wait. See, I've been told, Onyx, that you're a very good waiter, but waiting is very hard, isn't it? Very hard. See, in our little parable here, it's like Onyx is like the poet. He's waiting, and waiting is hard. There's this thrill of hope, this eager expectation that he has right now as he waits. Yeah, waiting, that's good timing. You're doing everything right, Onyx. Waiting is hard, but she's waiting really well. In the parable, she's like the poet. I guess I'm like the Lord, and sometimes we don't understand his timing. But we need to wait expectantly. We wait, and we wait, and we wait. And we go, come on, Onyx. Come on, come on, come on. Here you go, here you go. Good girl, good girl, good girl. Well done. Thank you. See, isn't this what waiting is like? And it is so, so painful to us at times. As I mentioned earlier, generation after generation upon generation waited for the coming of Jesus the first time. And they waited with expectancy, and they waited, in their case, for a long time. Some gave up and turned to kind of artificial things to help get them through, but Jesus still came. Came as that prophet, priest, king that we looked at last week in ways that nobody ever saw. And friends, we're in a very similar situation to these earlier generations. We're still waiting for Jesus to return a second time, this time to make all things new. Oh, but the waiting is hard, isn't it? You run into seasons in your life when you're going to be surrounded by people who will tell you it's not worth it. I mean, why would you devote your life to something that's 2,000 years old? Why would you believe this story that's like 2,000 years old? And around you, people will tell you this is all a myth. And you might remember the words from your uni lecturer, questioning how an all-powerful, all-loving God could ever coexist with suffering and pain in the world. And then you find yourself asking questions. I mean, do I stay with this difficult marriage and do what everyone or do what everyone else does and bail? Do I take this shady deal and be tempted through that to satisfy this longing I have, or do I do again what everyone else does? Do you question, you question yourself, are you missing out? Why am I not moving in? Why aren't I taking the money? Why aren't I running off? Why in the world am I continuing to believe this and shape my life around these promises? And you will find people who abandon their faith in the midst of challenges and beliefs and difficulties that they encounter just because waiting is so hard. But here at Green Lane Christian Centre, we are people who will wait. All around us, we see violence and we see murder and hunger and homelessness, brokenness and despair. Now, just in the last week or two, New Zealand has been appalled at the murder of the young British backpacker Grace Millane, just recently arrived in our country. And then we see the gap between the rich and the poor getting bigger and bigger to a stage that the poor are just struggling to cope. And then there's strife and there's tension between nations and peoples who live with uncertainty. And we wait. And we wait for Jesus to return and the peace and kindness and goodness that he embodies. So you might look at your marriage and think, it could never be what it should be. You just want to give up on hope. Or you're sick in body, or someone you love is sick. And I'm telling you, we serve a God who is able to heal. And whether he heals or he doesn't heal in the way we think he should, don't give up hope on what Jesus can do and will do. Or you're waiting. You're waiting for test results. You're waiting for blood tests. You're waiting for exam results. You're waiting for the job interview. or you have a spouse or child or grandchild who's turned their back on God. But church, don't lose hope. Wait with expectancy. Hold on to the hope that we profess. Now, I want us to sit with this point for a moment because I sense there's somebody here that kind of needs to hear this and speak it to their soul this morning. Don't surrender. Don't give up. Don't kind of cash in on that. It might be dark for you for a season, but there is a new and glorious morn that is going to come. Don't give up. Don't give up. Yes, it can be a wearisome world, but in the weariness, there's a thrill of hope. Don't give up on the hope that is right in front of you and what Jesus will do. Because the story of Christmas is a reminder that your faith in God is not misplaced. Even when God was silent for like 400 years, generation after generation who waited, it was never in vain. As the carol says, long lay the world in sin and error, pining. Pining, that's a word we don't tend to use anymore. If you want to know what pining looks like, I just looked at Onyx's face as she's like pining for what's in front of her, longing for it. As the poet of Lamentation shows us, what helps us in our waiting is the need for us to preach to ourselves about the goodness of God, about the character of God who loves you deeply and provides everything that we need. And we need to preach these things to ourselves so they move from just somewhere in our minds to front and center, affecting the way we see the world around us. And so we remind ourselves of Jesus' miracles, these signs pointing towards his coming kingdom. Every time he healed a sick person, it was a sign that one day, in a day to come, there would be no more sickness. When he fed the hungry, it was a sign pointing forward to a day that there would be no more poverty or hunger. When he treated women with respect and dignity, it was a sign pointing forward to a day where all people would be treated with dignity and respect, and there would be no more oppression or discrimination. When Jesus raised dead people to life, it was a sign that one day all death would be defeated. When Jesus stilled the storm, it was a sign that one day there would be no more earthquakes or tsunamis or other disasters, because Jesus will make all things new. But in the meantime, we wait. We wait. We wait with expectancy. Let me read Romans chapter 13, verses 11 and 12. For some of you, this will be your new favorite verses. This is all the more urgent, Paul writes, for you know how late it is. Time is running out. Wake up, for our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. I mean, church, do you see it? The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. The darkness is nearly over because the Son of God will return again. The darkness is nearly over because there is a new and glorious morn coming. You are nearer now today than when you first believed. You are nearer to the fulfillment of your hope now than when you first came to know Jesus. For some of you here today, this is about the salvation of your souls. Because some of you here in this room aren't yet a follower of Jesus. And my question for you today is what other source of unending love and unlimited compassion do you have other than the love that we actually see in this Christmas story? I mean, God the Father sent his Son to be born into our world and to suffer, to be afflicted, and to suffer silently, even to be crucified, being punished not for his sin because he had no sin, but for the hurtful actions and inactions of every single person, myself included in this room, and for the countless people like us who have turned to Jesus in order to find hope and identity and purpose. And how do we know that God accepted Jesus? Well, he raised Jesus from the dead. Jesus ascended into heaven and now calls you to trust in him and to believe in him so that you can have a relationship with the living God. You see, anything else, friend, you turn to in your life, it's effectively a cheap imitation and it won't provide what you're looking for. And for others of you, the salvation that the writer of Hebrews speaks about might be the salvation out of darkness, the darkness you're experiencing right now. I don't know what the timing of that looks like, and I don't know what form it might take, how it might be expressed. What I do know is that you need to hang on, cling to that hope, and to wait, and to wait. See, friends, we need Jesus. We long to be with him. We love him. We wait for his future arrival. This time not as a baby born in a manger, but as a ruler bringing peace and healing to our weary world. But in the meantime, we wait. We wait. We wait. As the poet of Lamentations sums it up so well. This I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. So Jesus, we're all here today needing hope. This thrill of hope we want to have right in front of us. Jesus, some here in this room today are experiencing this weary world in a very tangible, personal way. Help them remember who you are, your loyal love, your compassionate love, the way you are able to provide every single thing that they need. And help all of us to wait, and to wait with expectancy, with a thrill of hope, waiting, longing for the day when Jesus, you will put all things right in our world, when everything will be made new. In the meantime, help us to sit quietly before you and to take a deep breath while we hope and wait. And Jesus, some here in this room today have not yet turned to you. And friend, if that's you this morning, just while people are praying, you know, Jesus said in John chapter 1, to those who received him, to those who believed in his name, it's to these people he gave the right, the privilege of becoming children of God, which means for you, it's just simply believing in him, choosing to anchor your hope in who Jesus is. Perhaps you place that in a whole bunch of things or people around you that will let you down. Jesus won't let you down. So if that's you today, I encourage you to pray along with me. Jesus, I need you. Forgive me for the misplaced anchors I've had in my life, trying to find purpose and identity in all these other places. Forgive me for the actions and the inactions I've done in my life that aren't right. Thank you for taking my place and my penalty. And thank you that today, Jesus, you give me hope. So I give my life over to you. I surrender it to you. And I receive entrance into this new family of God. Thank you, Jesus. And Jesus, help all of us here today to wait with this thrill of hope, waiting with expectancy. We worship you. Thank you, Jesus.